Class is about to be in session for the Southern Conference preview here in 2025. SoCon Fast Break with Dean Keener starts now. All right, Dean, thank you so much. I mean, we knew we had to launch this podcast because there was some voids in mid-major content, especially with the Southern Conference. And what better way to kick off this series, this inaugural season here of SoCon Fast Break with none other than Mr. SoCon himself, Mr. Dean Keener, Coach Keener, I should say. Hey, thanks so much for joining Darren and I.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here. I don't know that Mr. SoCon just says that I'm old and been around for a while.
No, you're just wise. That's all it is, Coach, right? You're just a wise individual. Yes. And all right. So just even talk about, though, before we dive into this season and recapping a little bit of last season and everything with the Southern Conference, I want to walk back in a little bit of history just for you and your memories of playing in the Southern Conference there at Davidson, and then now, obviously, all the work that you do with the Southern Conference. What makes this conference so unique?
Well, where do you start, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I did play for Davidson in the late 80s. We were in the Southern Conference, looked a little bit different. You go back to the rivalries then with Marshall, Appalachian State, and others. But, it has remained over the course of 30, 40 years, such a terrific conference. And as you specifically talk about men's basketball, I think it starts with the leadership. Right. And John Marino and, all the commissioners and now Dr. Michael Cross and his staff and what they've done. But it doesn't just stop there. I think it's the membership, the presidents, the athletic directors and the coaches who make this such a special conference. And then you put the footprint, right? Even through the day and age of realignment, you still have the rivalries where you're not having to jump on a plane and change time zones and do a lot of different things. So even with all the change, a lot has remained the same over the years in Southern Conference men's basketball.
Yeah, and is there something to be said, Dean, just in terms of membership? And we know right now we talk about the transfer portal with players, but there's also seems to be a change in landscape and conferences with realignment and teams moving from conference to conference. But in all reality, the Southern Conference has done a really good job as far as retaining member institutions within the conference. Now, I know Tennessee Tech coming in next year, and it seems like they're very selective as far as looking at opportunities of adding teams, but really focused on retaining institutions.
Yeah, and they have, right? And again, that goes back to the leadership. Dr. Michael Cross leading things right now, and he's got a terrific staff. And even when some changes occurred back 20 years ago or so, then they were able to bring back VMI and ETSU into the fold after they had left for a while. And the uniqueness of the Southern Conference, you've got public institutions, you have private liberal art institutions, and you have two military institutions. Yet it all kind of blends together really well. And you go back to the period that they've been together, and those rivalries are just forged better than ever in men's basketball.
Yeah, no question. All right. So now looking at last year, and we see this crazy run there in Asheville, which, Dean, that seems like it happens each and every year. There's some type of surprise there, the conference tournament championship. And Wofford, a number 6 seed, they make that magical run. Your thoughts on how 2024 season ended with Chattanooga being the number 1 seed, but then it was Wofford, the number 6 seed, upsetting several teams, including Furman there in the championship game.
Yeah, they got hot at the right time, as the adage goes. But, and we can dive into this as we go on here today, but I personally love how Asheville is where we end it all every year. That arena is the perfect size for the Southern Conference basketball championships. The city embraces all of the member institutions and their fans. Ingles, joins in and does just a terrific job with other partners. But specifically, Dwight Perry at the time, he had those guys. They weren't playing their best basketball, in February. But boy, down the stretch, something magical happened. And once you win that first game, whether it's Friday or Saturday, you get a little bit of confidence, and you saw it out of them. And, they beat a team in Furman who's become really the gold standard, having played in 3 of the last 4 championships. But they were able to hang on, in fact, overcome a deficit there in the last couple of minutes.
That's right. Yes. And it seemed to be almost indicative of what Wofford's season was in terms of the microcosm that game was of what we saw with Wofford throughout the regular season.
Yeah. The highs and the lows.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a unique group. They weren't real deep. They had kind of an undersized center and Filowich that wasn't a great athlete, but we all know his trials and tribulations with free throw shooting. But he manned the post really well. And then, but they did have a dude, and they had Corey Tripp.
That's right.
Every team needs somebody, like when there's a lid on it, or they're just kind of in the mud offensively, that can go get them a basket or help create a basket for a teammate. And he was that guy.
Yeah, and Coach, you talk about how that team kind of just found a way to grind and survive. We talked late in that game. They looked like they were on the brink, and then there was that chase down block by Filowich that led to a transition 3 for Jackson Civils, and it just kind of seemed to take the lid off the basket. Can you speak a little bit more about the ebbs and flows of that game and kind of some things that you saw late that kind of allowed Wofford, when they looked a little bit on the ropes, to kind of be able to fight through and get that W?
Great memory. You're right. They were leaking oil, right? And
yes,
they were. The wheels were wobbling, and they just kind of hung in there. I think due in part that they did have some experience. Right? Tripp was a 4th-year guy. Civils had been around the program for a while. That's the interesting, and to me as a fan, no longer coaching, the fun part of Southern Conference or mid-major championships, right? I mean, there are no mulligans that time of year. You know that it's a one-bid league, or at least it has been, and every possession matters. And to your point, they got down, but Richmond, you mentioned it. It was a microcosm of their season where boy, they'd have a 2 or 3 game stretch where you thought, they've got a real chance when we get to March. And then just a week or 2 later, they look like a team that was a 6th place team. Credit the players, credit the staff for just having some resiliency on that Monday night in Asheville.
That's right. And nobody can take that championship away from them. They earned it. They won.
That's exactly right.
There in Asheville. So they do have that they can put on their resume. And then also, what about Dan Earl being to put on his resume the first NCAA sanctioned championship for a team out of the Southern Conference, winning the NIT? And just from the perspective of, Dean, you talk about the SoCon being a one-bid league. I think it showcased that maybe that shouldn't always be the case for the Southern Conference, because Chattanooga's able to go win the NIT. So you can't tell me that team wasn't capable of, with the guard play that you saw with Bonham and Huff. There's no doubt that team could have surprised somebody in the NCAA tournament.
Totally agree. They were a talented team. And, you go back, 2019, the ETSU, Steve Forbes.
Yes.
In 2020, I mean, the Southern Conference absolutely has been on the cusp of having that second team. And Chattanooga was like that last year. You felt just awful for those kids when they lost on Sunday in the semifinals, and yet give them credit for kind of bouncing back.
That's right.
The NIT is a tournament that, even though it's kind of changed over the years, it's still, there's something to play for. And if you can get your guys as a staff kind of rallied around the fact of let's hang together for a while, another couple of weeks, it's really about the first one. Once you get that first one, you can start to build some momentum. And I think talking to Coach Earl and some of his assistants, they love that team, and that team really had a unique culture about it. Even guys like Garrison Kiesler and others that were 1 or 2 year guys, they were about the team. And it doesn't surprise me of what they did, winning multiple games, but neat that they were on national TV multiple times to showcase not only their program, but the Southern Conference.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And Dean, you've played in the NCAA tournament as a player. You've coached in the NCAA tournament as an assistant coach, and obviously making the run there with Georgia Tech all the way to the national championship game. So you understand the magical feel of March Madness and the NCAA tournament. And as great as the NIT is as a tournament and winning an NIT championship, and again, that's a hallmark for Chattanooga and Dan Earl. They'll be able to always talk about that. But I think I want to get your thoughts on this because we've all coached. The goal, it's the NCAA tournament. And there's something magical about being able to punch your ticket. Again, even though you win the NIT, is there still something more so that everybody's goal at the end of the day, it's can we get to the NCAA tournament?
Ultimately, that is everybody's goal. Right?
Yeah.
In Division I and specifically the Southern Conference. We're getting ready to start very, very soon. And once that season goes over the course of 170 days-ish, that's the goal is to be playing on Monday night in Asheville and cut down the nets. Now, I will tell you, regardless of whether it's a regular season championship, a tournament championship, or winning the NIT, there is something really, really unique that bonds a team or a group of men for a lifetime when they win something. But Richmond, to your point, there's nothing better than March Madness. It galvanizes the country, right? Even if you're not a basketball fan, everybody knows the term March Madness.
Exactly. And then even looking at the Southern Conference, especially last year, and we could probably actually talk about this regardless of the season because I think it's somewhat universal, but just from a coaching perspective, I mean, the level of success that we've seen from some of these teams, I mean, it does say something about the coaches in terms of not only the quality of coaching, but also the ability to bring in some of these players, and especially with the evolution of utilizing the transfer portal. I'm telling you, I think the Southern Conference, even when you look at some of the Ken Palm ratings and all of that, and I know we can dive into all those stats as far as where the Southern Conference ranks, but I still contend, maybe I'm biased, and I know you even still feel that you're part of the Southern Conference, but I feel the Southern Conference is still underrated, Dean.
I would agree. I absolutely would agree on a number of levels. Now, look, make no mistake that the body of work that schools have done over the years in the conference office, they've got 10 national television games. They have, and they will continue. I think they're deserving of more.
Yeah.
That said, there was a time. Look, you can kind of go. There's eras in every conference. And, we can go back to when Steph Curry, the couple of years that he was at Davidson, it was must see if he came to town and Davidson was filling every arenas. But, I think we're in a period now, the last decade, if you will, or really 8 years. You think of some of the teams that have been here and have either been worthy of an at-large bid or the champions that have gone on. Right. Like, Mike Young's group at Wofford with Fletcher McGee and those guys, Cam Jackson, they won an NCAA game and very well could have beaten Kentucky in the second round. And Bob Ritchie's group a couple of years ago, Richmond, I know you followed them very closely.
Yeah.
Darren, you were there. So again, it speaks to the coaching in this league, the competitiveness, and even as we have morphed into this NIL transfer portal age, the coach is doing a heck of a job. I would add one more thing. Like, there was a time where, sure, Bob McKillop had opportunities. He didn't leave.
Yes.
But from about 1995 to 2015, I mean, there was about a 20-year period where, like it or not, the Power Fives, if you want to say Power Four and Big East and men's basketball, they weren't really looking at coaches in the Southern Conference. And now they're getting poached. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Steve Forbes at Wake and Mike Young at Virginia Tech and Wes Miller at Cincinnati and Lamont Parish, South Carolina. Yeah. I mean, even Justin Gray. Now, some would consider it a lateral move, et cetera. But he does a heck of a job for a couple of years at Western and goes to Coastal Carolina. Don't think the Sun Belt's as good as the Southern. Again, we're biased. But nevertheless, administrators are looking at the Southern Conference and the coaches. That speaks volumes as well.
Oh, no question about it. And then we can go straight into that in terms of some of the off-season themes that we were exposed to in the Southern Conference and some of that coaching, what you're talking about with being poached as Bucky McMillan gets poached into the SEC with Texas A&M. And then you also see the craziness that happened, unfortunately, at Wofford, and we're going to talk about that. But I think one of the themes is the reshuffling, the coaching carousel that has happened, and especially when you're looking at Samford and you're wondering, you lose Bucky McMillan, Bucky Ball, all of the excitement with that. But my goodness, Dean, you're bringing in Lenny Akuff. I mean, I think some of the other coaches got to be like, what in the world? You're bringing in basically a Hall of Fame coach into the conference. So it just continues to ratchet up the level of high-quality coaches.
You make a great point. I just talked about the ones that were leaving for maybe higher grounds. But yeah, now for a guy like Lenny Akuff to recognize, I mean, he had a pretty good gig. He was doing a heck of a job at Division II, Alabama Huntsville, and what he was doing at Lipscomb. And for him, and I know he's got Alabama ties, but I don't know that we would have seen that, 10 years ago or so. So again, speaks volumes. And talking to him, he recognizes, the competitiveness and the play. He made a comment to me during Southern Conference Media Day. You're not going to outcoach people in this league. You're going to have to make sure you got players and put them together quickly. You might be able to outculture them, but you're not going to outcoach them.
Yeah, and can you speak a little bit more to, a lot of times when you have a scenario, when you have a new coach coming in, there is a little bit of a step back just because you kind of have to hit the regroup button, the reset button, however you want to phrase it. But with a guy of Coach Lenny Akuff's stature coming in, can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on, does Samford really kind of take a year where they have to regroup and kind of get used to this culture again? Or does this look like a scenario where you bring in a guy like Lenny Akuff and you can hit the ground running and compete for a championship right away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so many of the fans would think not just Coach Akuff and Samford, but, oh gosh, you can just, in this age of the transfer portal, go get your pick of guys. It's kind of like just throw gasoline on a fire and it's going to take off. There's a lot more to it than that, right? And
that's right.
That said, he's got a really good system. He was able to bring, Dylan Faulkner, a talented player, with him. My guess is because of his stature, the respect he'll garner from the players that wanted to come play for him and his staff, I think they're going to hit the ground running. I think they're right there in the mix, in the top 3 or 4. Could take some time in the preseason / non-conference portion to come together. But yeah, my guess is when we hit, February 1 or so, Samford will be right there in the mix.
Yeah, no question. And then we look at the other coaching change there. And Dean, this is one of those unique, unprecedented type of situations that we saw at Wofford with Dwight Perry and the issues there and ultimately being let go. So I think what Wofford was able to do, at least with the chaos, this seems to be a guy with Coach Giltner that at least he can be a stabilizer, so to speak, because I don't know what to make of the entire situation, Dean.
Yeah, and I'm with you. It's awfully tough. Personally, I like Dwight Perry. I like Ty Anderson. I've known those guys for many years through the basketball channels. Don't know that I ever got the total story from anybody on the inside or the outside.
Yeah.
All of that said, I'm hopeful that they'll find their place, in 6 months if they want to choose to stay in basketball. But you're exactly right. Giltner, look, now I am showing my age. When I started doing this, he was still playing for Mike Young. Look, he's walked the halls of that. He's walked the campus and he knows and bleeds Wofford. So I do think, to your point, Richmond, they got the right guy at the right time under the circumstances that can lead them. I mean, it was going to be an interesting year. I choose my words wisely. Just having lost all 5 guys from that
no doubt,
team.
Exactly. Yeah, it's already tough enough. Just the rebuild, so to speak, with replacing all that you lost. And there's other teams that are in similar situations, but even more so when you add the chaos of the coaching staff is gone, and you've got to bring in a new coaching staff, and that puts Coach Giltner behind the 8 ball immediately. I mean, Dean, look how it's got to be so difficult to try to build a program that quickly. So again, who knows what this season is going to look like for Wofford. But the other R that we wanted to talk about with the biggest off-season themes, we had the reshuffling with the coaches, and then the other one, replacing the massive production drain via the portal. And there's also eligibility exhausted as well for some of these players. But my goodness, you look at ETSU, they lose the player of the year in Peterson there and the defensive player of the year. I mean, so we're seeing it across the board that a lot of these teams, Dean, they're going to have to completely reshuffle their entire roster.
Yeah, it's tough, right? For a fan nowadays, you better just get used to buying a program every year because, look, and we can get to Bob, Richie, and what they've done. Their retention, at Furman is fantastic. But generally speaking, the Southern Conference is like everybody else at all different levels. They're not immune to the transfer portal, and it's going to continue unless the NCAA and others are able to put some guardrails on things. I think we're going to continue to see this.
That's right.
Does it make it challenging for coaches? Absolutely. But I think the 10 coaches on the men's side and talking to them individually have all embraced it. And so they know it's here to stay, at least for now, and they've adjusted, and you've got to mix the old with the new. And sometimes, to your point, with what Coach Savage has to do in Johnson City, I mean, it's not old with new. It's basically put all the new pieces.
That's right.
Yeah. It's really challenging.
That's right. And we see, Mike Jones at UNCG losing his backcourt. I mean, all SoCon backcourt there also. And then Chattanooga, as we've already talked about, I mean, with Huff and Bonham, losing those guys. But then you talk about the other team, you mentioned Furman. And so the other R with the off-season theme is reloading, because I think there are some teams that they still have opportunity with retention that you talked about, and Furman's one of them, and even Chattanooga to a certain degree with Colin Mulholland going to be returning. But with Furman, they've got an opportunity with an elite front court now when you talk about Charles Johnston and Ben Vanderwall, and then also the big man, Cooper Bowser. Yeah, absolutely. Just huge amount of credit. And I mean, it speaks volumes to what Furman basketball is all about. The culture that they have created over the last 8 or 9 years with Bob Ritchie there at the helm. I'm sure getting Cooper's brother Cole, signing him, doesn't hurt. That's right.
Those two are playing together, but nevertheless, there's I'm sure Bowser and others had opportunities if they wanted to, and they chose to stay at Furman, kind of open the renovated, the new Timmons Arena, a lot of excitement around that, but had a chance to do their exhibition game against Alabama. And, they jumped out quickly. Yeah. You guys saw it 9-0, but they, slowly Alabama came back. But don't judge them, any of the listeners, right, by that 20-point loss. Alabama, if they can get their defense right, if their size, length, guard play, they're a Final Four type of team.
No doubt.
Again, Furman will be right there at the end. They've just got too many good players. They've added a really good freshman class. They've got to be near or at the top as we enter regular season play.
That's right. And even the athleticism of Alabama. I mean, it was evident there, especially in the second half. But then also you look at the halves, so to speak, and even like a Samford, ETSU, with the transfer portal, at least on paper, the success that we saw them bringing in some guys, because when you look at it on paper, Dean, I mean, these looks like transfer classes that they could have a major impact, especially when it gets to conference play.
For sure. In talking to Coach Akuff, I mean, he loves the Kid Booth, the Division II. And it's interesting how many boy, there've been a ton of Division II guys come to a lot of leagues and have success, but in particular the Southern Conference. Right? I mean, PJ Smith and Nick Anderson at Furman last year come to mind, and he talks about Coach Akuff talks about Booth as just a fantastic player coming from Florida Southern. I think I don't think we can undersell either what the fan bases in some of these schools, like ETSU, what Forbes did and what Savage has been able to get back. Like, they're going to fill Freedom Hall. And years ago, that wasn't the case at the Pete Hanna Center in Samford. And now what Bucky and those guys did,
that's right.
I think there's a level of excitement. So even with the changes, they're going to continue to have some home court advantages. And then you add some really good players that fans may not know about now for whatever reason. I think both those two have reloaded with a lot of talent.
That's right. If Booth could be what we think he might be, I'm telling you, Homewood's going to be hopping down there at Samford, I promise you. That's for certain.
Coach, you mentioned, the culture that Furman has been able to build over the last 8 or 9 years. And, I know we talk about it all the time, culture, and it can be a cliche term. But how important, especially at the mid-major level and with the Southern Conference being a league that has seen a fair amount of guys get poached, frankly, because it's a good league. But how important when you have scenarios like ETSU and Samford and Chattanooga that are bringing in massive transfer classes just because of the turnover, how much more important is culture today when you can really set the tone, because you really have to get that team molded with 7, 8, 9 guys at times, whereas 6 or 7 years ago, you may have a couple guys sprinkle in here and there, but you had your base set.
Yep. Yeah. Another great question. And you're right. Like, look, I would think any coach, or for that matter, any CEO would say culture, everything starts with culture, and it starts with people. But to your point, you're exactly right. It's more important than ever that, in a decade ago, the juniors and more the seniors, they might, not haze, but they might push the freshmen a little bit. But when there was culture, they were still there to teach and help bring them along. And so now, if you don't have the right culture whereby your staff or your few returning players can help integrate the massive amount of new players into what are the standards of your program, boy, you're behind the 8 ball right away. And you're constantly trying to play catch up. So you're exactly right. I think culture has always been important, but it's even more important right now. And how you define culture, and coaches can throw that a lot of different ways, but it's about the standards that the head coach has set, not rules, but the standards.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So D, now let's transition to looking at this 2025 season and who can contend for a SoCon championship there in Asheville come March of 2026. We can go right down through the coaches poll in terms of what we saw preseason. And I think it probably would mirror what we're probably thinking as well. But I want to get your thoughts. I think there's the big three. You've got Chattanooga, Furman, and Samford. And they seem to be the teams, at least right now, again, a lot of basketball to be played, that if you're looking at the Southern Conference, you have to put that group of three ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, totally agree. It's really hard nowadays to have a preseason poll.
Yes.
Or select preseason all-conference guys. That said, you're spot on. I mean, those three, I don't know what particular order.
Yeah.
I think Furman, just based on the number of returnees and that front line.
Yes.
If their backcourt, in particular, their point guard play can be solid, and we can talk about Alex Wilkins and others in a minute, but I think they're right there at the top. I mean, look, and they can play big. They can play a lot of different ways, or they're versatile. They can play a little smaller and play a little faster. And, you guys are closer to that program than I am in many ways, but look, they bring in Joe Pierre, who spent, a number of years with Richie McKay at Liberty and that pack line defense. And
Yeah.
so if they really are going to use some of those concepts, and now you've got rim protection like Bowser and even Johnston, not that he's known as a shot blocker, but he's really big in this for this league. That's going to be difficult for other teams to penetrate. So yes, it's Furman, Dan Earl, and how they have continued to build off of the NIT run. You know, people talk about Mulholland, and it starts with him. And I think he gained a ton of confidence.
No doubt. And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you about Mulholland. It seemed to be, I mean, he was the pivotal piece for that NIT run to the championship and ultimately getting that banner there for the NIT. And your thoughts on what his ceiling can be heading into this season?
Yeah. Unlimited of sort, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's put on, according to Dan Earl, good weight. He has expanded his game a little bit like Charles Johnston too. I mean, he worked more on his low post game than he did his perimeter game, but he's going to be kind of that Jake Stevens facilitator in their offense at the top of the key. And if you back off of him, he can take and make a three at just a good enough clip to be dangerous. The guy that they're really talking about is Teddy Washington Jr.
Yes.
Haven't seen him, full disclosure, but first team all conference in the Ohio Valley last year, averaged 14 a game. They love him as much at the offensive end and how he can create and score as they do at the defensive end. They think he can be as good a defender as the Southern Conference seen in a while. I said, whoa, that's a pretty heady statement. There's been some pretty good, Giles and the Langley, excuse me, and some others. Yes. There've been some good perimeter defenders lately.
Oh, no question about it. And I do think he's going to bring some physicality, Teddy Washington Jr., that is, especially on that defensive side. And so, Dean, I'm going to age myself here because speaking of Dan Earl, so when I was assistant coach at Maryland Eastern Shore, we played Penn State. And just happened to be that the starting point guard as a sophomore was Dan Earl there at Penn State. Yeah, so we go way back. I had a great laugh with Dan about that, just the circle of life, how it comes together like that. It's absolutely crazy. All right, but going back to Furman, though, just in terms of typically a Bob Ritchie team, it's been guard-oriented, and it's been all about, transition, getting some threes in transition. But now with this front court, it seems like there might be a little bit of an opportunity to pivot to an inside-outside type of offense. Yep. And I'm curious to see how this is going to play out, and especially if you have somebody like Alex Wilkins. Again, we got a lot of basketball to go, a lot to be told about that freshman. But my goodness, he could be a big impact player. But again, it's going to be maybe a little bit different offense for Bob Ritchie.
I would think so. Yeah, it's I guess the coach in me never wants to speak too much about a freshman, right?
Yes, that's right.
A man among boys in high school is just a man among men at the college level. But I think Wilkins does have some special abilities. He can be really, really good for them out of the gate. It'll take some time, but we saw some glimpses even, on Sunday when they were playing Alabama. He was not scared in the moment. But it will be interesting. Now, I think they can continue to play at a fast pace.
Oh, yeah.
Because Johnston and Bowser have the athleticism to keep up.
That's right.
But yet now there's going to be some moments where they may have to play a little bit more inside out than they have in the past. I'll say this also. I thought, whether it's Bob or the staff or collectively, thought there was some times last year early where they were struggling with Ben Vanderbilt. And let me say, I love Ben Vanderbilt as much as any player in the Southern Conference. Right? You've called him a glue guy. I would agree.
Yes.
There's things that some show up on the stat sheet, some don't, that just help teams win.
Yes.
That said, he's not a three-point shooter.
That's right.
And teams were playing off of him. And I thought they figured that out last year. And they kind of tweaked some things, and he became a better on-ball and off-the-ball screener within their offense. And as they continue to do that, their offense can be pretty darn productive.
Yeah, I would agree from that side of things. And I'm also interested to see how the Clemson transfer, Asa Thomas, how he's going to develop, because I think this guy can be an elite level type of shooter. Just obviously didn't have the opportunity at Clemson. Some injuries played a big role in that. Yep. And I think this could be a guy that fits just perfectly for Bob Ritchie's system.
Absolutely. Think about this. I mean, you could go, and I don't know exact size, but with him and Vanderwall, Johnston, and Bowser, he literally could go 6'7", 6'7", 6'10", 6'11".
Yes.
And that's a power 5 lineup, not just front court.
That's right.
And have some real options. You're right. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player for them as well. And hopefully he has found a spot. Unfortunately, redshirted, had some injury problems.
Yeah.
Could really have a breakout for them.
That's right. And then for Samford, I know we've already talked about Jaden Booth, but I'm also very interested in even getting your perspective, because I'm really wanting to see how Dylan Faulkner, can he be 100% healthy? Because I thought we were able to see a lot being a big part of that run for Lipscomb. And again, obviously the injury impacted his season. But I think this is a guy who could come in and adapt pretty quickly here in the SoCon, Dean.
Saw him quite a bit when he was in high school, followed his career at the college level. You're spot on. If he stays injury-free and he can, they can surround him with some players, he's an all-conference kind of talent. They're also high on another big guy who redshirted last year, and Bucky, like Caleb Harrison, local guy.
That's right.
That redshirted last year, just it was a numbers game. And I know the former staff really liked him, and now the new staff does as well. And then Keaton Morris, transfer point guard, is another guy that Coach Akuff has been high on in the preseason. So really be fun to watch how he can bring these newcomers together here in a hurry.
Yeah. All right. Another thing that we see in the Southern Conference, and especially when it comes tournament time, there's a wild card team out there. There's some of these dark horse teams and what we might call, best of the rest, maybe kind of middle of the pack. But a team like ETSU, can they climb up into that upper echelon? And then UNCG with Mike Jones, again, it's going to be a rebuild type of situation. And then the other one, I'm anxious to see VMI, Andrew Wilson. And Dean, just talk about what we saw in terms of the improvement last year with Andrew Wilson. And obviously, when you have players, it does help, like Ricky Bradley Jr. I mean, that does help from a coaching perspective.
Well, you can't say enough about what Andrew Wilson has done. Would have been very easy for him after 2 years to say, man, this is tough sledding. I mean, arguably VMI is the toughest men's basketball job in Division I.
Yes.
And now in this age of transfer portal, they're limited. You have to have a guy with 3 years eligibility and, NIL or lack of, it's become even more difficult. Would have been easy for him to be like, you know what? I'm going to go back and be an assistant for Mark Byington, my former boss, and now at Vanderbilt or whatever. I'm making that up, but he has embraced, I guess, the VMI way, and the guys getting up at 5 and 6 in the morning and marching and so forth. And then look, credit those guys for. We talk about Bob Ritchie and staff having guys stick around. They've got a ton of returners, and a ton of production coming back. How they play now as the hunted, I guess. And when I say the hunted, it's no longer, especially on it's always difficult. I feel like it's always been difficult, even when they haven't been overly successful over the years, to go to Lexington.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Cold,
totally agree.
Wednesday night or Saturday. And if the cadets aren't there, it's kind of family and friends. So as an opposing coach, it can be hard to get your guys up. But generally speaking, most players and coaches over the years kind of circled them as, hey, when they come to our place, that's a W. No more.
Yeah.
And so now how do the Keydets react to being the hunted when they go to Freedom Hall, when they go to Timmons Arena?
Yeah. They're
going to get those teams' best shot. And so it'll be really interesting to see. I feel like they're up for the challenge, but there's still some holes and some gaps in that roster, but it's as talented as they've had in a long time.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm anxious to see to your point, being somewhat of the hunted, because they will have a little bit of a target in terms of there's more, spotlight on VMI based on the amount of production they've got coming back. It's the most production returning in the entire conference. So then when you have preseason that Ricky Bradley Jr. has been selected as the preseason conference player of the year, that all of a sudden changes some of the dynamics, as you're not the underdog. You're not that little old VMI, so to speak. But what do you think the ceiling is then for Ricky Bradley Jr.? Can he live up to that hype?
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly a talented guard. You'd have to fact check. I think they're second behind Purdue in Division I.
Yes, that's right.
Returning.
Yes.
Back to what you guys mentioned, a little while ago on this. That's a story that, in my opinion, should have garnered last year, and now even in the preseason, should have garnered national attention, national news. And we went back, when you were saying, hey, the Southern Conference doesn't quite get the exposure or the respect. I think that's a perfect example. I mean, VMI is an awesome story right now as it relates to what Andrew Wilson and those guys have done. Specifically, I think Bradley's talented enough to stand up to maybe some of the accolades. Is he the player of the year? I don't know. I think I respect the heck out of his game. He probably got it because he was the only returning all-conference guy from a year ago. Right? Everybody else had either transferred out or graduated. And most coaches or media Bradley was, second team a year ago. He's the best returning player. He might very well be, but he's going to need help. And I think the supporting cast may be the bigger question is how can TJ Johnson and some of those other guys, have they elevated their games to be able to go on the road and beat the Furmans, the Samfords, the ETSU, et cetera.
That's right. And then UNCG with Mike Jones. I mean, if there's one thing we know, it's going to be defense, Dean. I mean, that's the epitome of when you're looking at the definition of defense, especially in the Southern Conference. But at the end of the day, though, Dean, it comes back to the question that I have asked several years, because we've seen it, unfortunately, for the Spartans there, is can they win in Asheville? And that's where they have struggled, because at the end of the day, that's where you're being measured. Yeah.
No, and I know that weighs heavily on Coach Jones.
Yeah.
We've kind of talked about that offline. He understands. He's a terrific coach. He's an even better human being. But he knows that they need to reach Asheville playing their best basketball and to win in advance. I have spoken with them. I can't speak specifically to the personnel. I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times. They were hit as hard as anybody.
Yeah, no doubt.
With the portal and graduation. Felt like the Langleys were there forever. Felt like Donovan Atwell was there.
Yes, he was.
Years, right? Yes. And all those guys have moved on. I mean, Mikel Brown-Jones. And they've had some really good players. I get the feeling they've got a good group. Jones likes the group. But for me to specifically say where they fit in, I mean, there's a couple of teams that could be considered sleepers. I certainly think they're one of them.
Yeah, no question. All right. And then looking at what maybe we're trying to understand, rebuild down at the bottom tier of the Southern Conference. And again, this is not disparaging any team. And Darren and I have talked about it just in terms of some of this is just relative in terms of where we put and stack these teams, because there's so many good teams. It's hard to break into that upper tier, that upper echelon. But you look at Western Carolina, Mercer, Wofford, and the Citadel, and I do think, Dean, there has to be a scenario where the Citadel is not going to go winless in the conference this year, not back-to-back.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised it happened last year.
Yes.
Ed Conroy is a terrific coach.
Yes.
And it can be difficult different maybe than going to Lexington, but there's times when the campus and their core are in the stands, that can be McAllister Fieldhouse can be a tough place to play. So I'm my guess is Ed Conroy has worked over the last 6 months to figure out how do we get better through recruiting freshmen, high school, how do we get better with taking some selective transfers. They like some of the guys they have. And I'm sure he has tweaked the system just a little bit. This is not the Southern Conference and the environment of where they were when he was here during his first stop. Or should I say his second stop?
Yeah, that's
I
right.
played against him when he was a heck of a point guard for Les Robinson back in the day. But I think I'd be stunned if they didn't accumulate a number of wins. I think in that group, look, Ryan Ritter, second tour through, now at Mercer.
Yeah,
they like a bunch of guys, and we can get to them. But I'm interested to see what Western Carolina does.
Yes.
I was a huge fan. I think you guys would probably agree. Marcus Kell was as good a player for about a 4-week or 5-week stretch as anybody in the conference last year, late January, February.
Agreed, 1,000%. I'm anxious to see, again, we talk about ceilings of some of these players, and I don't want to necessarily put a ceiling because, hey, it could be uncapped, but I am interested to see what his next step here is under, Tim Kraft and Tim Kraft's second year there at Western.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Cord Stansbury's back. He was a double-digit scorer, and look, I don't know all the conversations that went on, but as a kind of an outsider that's on the inside, for Kell to stick around and based on what he did, speaks volumes to Tim Kraft and his staff. Like that.
Yes.
Kell is all in. And I know he's somewhat local and so forth, but still, I'm sure that there was some NIL out there for him.
Yes.
Like that's a huge cornerstone as Coach Kraft and that staff try to kind of put things together in their own making. So, if he and Stansbury can continue to elevate their game and they can add a few more pieces, I don't know that it can be, 2 years ago when Justin Gray had Montarius Woolbright and that special group. But I think that can be a really tough out, especially when you go to the Ramsey Center.
Oh, yeah,
certainly.
No doubt about it. Well, I remember that Western Carolina team, and obviously you were there calling those games as they had Furman on the brink of that season, and I'm sitting there, doing the documentary like, oh, my goodness, it can't end like this. That's for certain. But, Justin Gray had them playing really well. All right, going back to Mercer real quick, though, with Ryan Ritter and all the transfer guys that he's got coming in, I'm very interested also in Barako Koji, obviously coming from Memphis, but what he did at George Mason his freshman year. And I think this guy, given the opportunity, he could do something special also this season, Dean.
Agreed. Yes. To your point, kind of has a body of work at Mason. Didn't play a ton. He's behind PJ Haggerty and some others at Memphis. So, I think this is a guy that, early in the season we could all start talking about not only him, but the Mercer Bears.
Yes.
Another guy that at least comes from some Kyle Cuff Jr. that has some.
Yeah, that's right.
Syracuse and has some, high major experience. So we know they'll play fast. I know Ritter has said we're going to get better defensively. Not that they were bad last year, but look, he's won everywhere he's been at every level.
Yes.
I expect Mercer will win. To what degree this year, I don't know. I'm anxious. I'm going to go down and do their opening game against LaGrange College.
Nice.
November 6th. So, their opening home game. So they open at Tennessee.
That Tennessee, that's a tough one to start with.
Exactly. But, I think if, we talked about it before this, and you mentioned it. If they can get better defensively, just collectively free throw shooting has been just a been difficult for them.
That's
Even go back to Greg Gary's last couple of years. We go back, not that long ago, Hawkins Arena, there was some talented players, and that was a tough out when you went down there. I know they want to get back there sooner than later.
No doubt. All right, and then just looking at what I've labeled the crisis. And again, that sounds so negative, but it's the reality at Wofford. What are we to make of Wofford? Because, Dean, I don't know if I can even understand what their potential is or what their floor or ceiling can be.
And I would agree, right? I mean, is Luke Flynn ready to take over the point guard slot full time? That's a big question.
That's right.
Great kid, great talent, but now, thankfully he did have a year kind of behind Tripp and, some of Justin Bailey. I mean, having to go against him every day in practice.
That's right.
When he's defending you is only going to make you better. So I would think Flynn will be ready. Kamari Holmes, kind of an undersized 3-4. They've got Wofford doesn't get a lot of JUCO players.
Yeah.
And so, I can't adequately assess kind of where they're at right now. They could finish 10th because they just don't have
that's right
enough, and Giltner didn't have enough time.
Yep.
Or they could finish, 4th, 5th, or 6th, and you're like, oh my gosh, Giltner is the coach of the year kind of thing.
Yeah.
Neither scenario would surprise me.
Yeah, no question. All right, so moving forward, now let's almost fast forward to the end of the year. Who are some of the players that you have your eye on, Dean, in terms of that could make a splash and might be in the conversation for player of the year?
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot. I think one of the dark horses, Jalen Smith at ETSU,
That's
transfer from North Florida.
Yeah.
Gosh, what Matt Driscoll did. Matt Driscoll's now left but at North Florida, right? The year before he lost Chaz Lanier to Tennessee, etc. Jalen Smith is a talented guard. I think, where does Ricky Bradley Jr. stack up? Does Faulkner healthy? Is Furman's got a couple of guys. I don't know that Bowser is the player of the year, but if he embraces physicality and develops that dominant mindset, at the defensive end, I mean, he could lead the league in block shots, rebounding, and heck, in field goal percentage.
Yeah,
and so. Right. And none of those are out of the realm of things. So he's probably a guy that's going to be considered that way. Cullen Mulholland is a guy, potentially Teddy Washington Jr. I think there's probably 8 or 10, maybe 12 as we begin the season. That'll whittle down. But again, it kind of goes back to full disclosure. I haven't seen all of the transfers. Maybe saw them once a year ago at their former school, but don't know how they're going to fit into the system at, ex-Southern Conference school.
Oh, no question. And I know this is a hard test, Dean, because we haven't even
I feel like I'm back at Davidson again.
Yeah, that's right. The professor hasn't even given us the outline of what we're supposed to study, because we just don't know in terms of being able to evaluate some of these players. And that's why I even think the non-conference games are going to be so vital from a coaching perspective and scouting perspective, because this is at least going to be an opportunity to start seeing some of these players that you're going to have to face night in and night out in the Southern Conference. So there's going to be a lot of assistants, Dean, that are going to be working overtime, breaking down these non-conference games that are getting ready to start. All right, some of the newcomers, though, that I am interested in, we've talked about several of these. Asa Thomas there at Furman. I'm even interested in Milton Matthews at ETSU, also another guy, again, transferring in from Florida A&M. And Jakari Johnson, can he be a guy at Chattanooga that comes in and plays, immediately? And then we've talked about it. Furman, Alex Wilkins, I think there's a big opportunity for him to showcase how talented he is. But again, it's making that transition. And making that transition as freshmen, that's not always easy. And especially, Dean, now where you're also having to compete against transfers that are coming in. So it's hard for a freshman to come in, especially at a guard position too, in this league.
Yeah, it is. And it would be easy for me to say, he arguably on paper and what we've seen very early on is the best freshman coming into the league. We'll see how that plays out. Interesting, though, there's not as many freshmen coming into the league.
No, that's right.
And quite honestly, I find that sad.
Yeah.
On a number of levels, but these coaches, the clock in terms of having to win now is maybe more relevant than ever before. So even Southern Conference coaches have turned to the portal, like others at other levels. Let me go back real quick when you talked about like the non-conference being important.
Yeah.
We said at the top of the podcast, like what Michael Cross and the commissioner and his staff have done. I think the ASUN Southern Conference challenge, if you will, those games, I think that's terrific. because many times we don't really find out what an individual or a team is like playing a non-Division I.
That's right.
But sometimes you can't find that on the other end. They go to a top 10 Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Duke, and it's hard to gauge just how good they're going to be. So I think that helps level set, and not only but it gets quality games for Southern Conference schools.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. All right, so then now crystal ball time, Dean. We're going to put you to the test as best as we can, though. Based on some of the research you've done, your homework, preparing for this season, what's a team or a couple of teams that you might have your eye on that can be a surprise this year?
Yeah, within the conference.
Yes.
I think we've discussed all of them on various levels. I think Samford may be the one that sticks out. Now we've put them kind of in the top 3.
That's right.
Or top tier, if you will. But I still believe that as much as the Southern Conference coaches respect Lenny Akuff, they're still questioning, can they put it together in year 1?
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested to watch. Faulkner came with him, but how does he integrate some of these other transfers? My money would be on they're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to kind of continue the rhythm that Bucky Ball and Bucky McMillan kind of had the last several years. I would think if we kind of revisited in late January, early February, we would be talking about the crowds at the Pete Hanna Center and the record that Samford has in conference play. Yeah,
no question about it. And the teams that you think can cut down the net in Asheville, it's obviously Samford could be one of those, right?
Yep. No, I think Furman is the one that really, because of talent, retention, coaching, etc. Chattanooga not far behind for some of the same reasons. I would, the interesting one too also, and I would finish by saying ETSU. Got to keep an eye on them.
That's right, Dean. Yes.
Look, as much as we talk about Mike Jones and his defense, I'm just telling you now, give Brooks Savage a group of dudes, and they're going to be tough, gritty, and they're going to get up in you and play really, really hard.
No question. I would agree 1,000%. I think that could be a dark horse, especially if they get things clicking. And as you know, I mean, you've got the non-conference part of the season, the regular season conference part of the season, but then if you can get hot for 3 games in Asheville, depending on where you're seated, obviously, and then you can have a magical run. And we've seen those type of things happen because there will be some chaos, Dean. We've seen it too many times there in Asheville. We talk about it quite often. All right, one last question, though, Dean. With your schedule this year, how many days are you going to be traveling, calling games? What does it look like? Where are we going to find Dean?
But I'm blessed. I love it more than I think you guys, Richmond, you've done some. It keeps me connected to a profession that I did for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of just be within that SoCon footprint. Unfortunately, don't have a game yet anyway in Charleston. So I have the Citadel on the road. I hate that because I love visiting that town.
Oh yeah, food, that's
right. But you'll find me at a lot of Southern Conference schools, some non-conference, and then once the calendar turns January, it'll be Wednesdays and Saturdays at various places.
There you go. Love it. Dean, thanks you so much. Greatly appreciated, especially being on our inaugural episode of SoCon Fast Break. It's been an honor. We greatly appreciate it. And everybody out there, remember, all you have to do is hit that subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast, including the iHeartRadio app. Until next time, may all your jumpers hit nothing but the bottom of the net.